me your brother!
The first shot cracked the windshield before Mason even understood it was a gunshot. Nora screamed his name. A black SUV came out of nowhere, skidding sideways across the empty gas station lot, and 4 men in tactical gear exploded from it like they'd done this 100 times before. One of them hit Nora so hard she slammed into the pump. Another grabbed her by the throat. The tallest one, the one in matte black body armor, face half hidden behind a scarf, didn't point his rifle at Mason. He pointed it at Mason's daughter. "Don't move," he said, calm as rain, while 8-year-old Ellie stared from the back seat with both hands over her mouth. Then Nora looked at the masked man, went pale, and whispered one word like she'd seen a ghost. "No." If you've ever loved someone so much that 1 second could split your life into before and after, stay with me. Because what Mason did next should have gotten him killed. And the truth he uncovered afterward was worse than the ambush. The man dragged Nora toward the SUV. Mason didn't think. Thinking was for people who had options. He grabbed the tire iron from the floorboard, kicked his truck door open, and charged. Bullets snapped past him. Glass burst somewhere behind his head. He heard Ellie scream, "Dad!" The man holding the rifle turned, but Mason was already there. He swung the tire iron so hard it bent in his hands. Metal cracked against the attacker's forearm. The rifle hit the concrete. Another man rushed him. Mason took a blow to the ribs that nearly folded him, then drove his shoulder forward like an animal. They both crashed into the gas pump. Nora stumbled free, coughing, hands clawing at her neck. The tall Commando moved with terrifying speed. 1 second he was near the SUV. The next, he had Mason by the collar, a knife pressed so cold under his jaw that Mason stopped breathing. The man's eyes were gray, empty, focused. Then those eyes shifted past Mason, to Ellie in the truck. Something flickered. Not mercy, recognition. He tightened his grip and said to Nora, "You should have come when I asked." Nora's face crumpled. "I can't." "You already did this once." Mason slammed his forehead into the man's nose. It bought half a second. Enough. Nora snatched the fallen rifle, hands shaking, and pointed it like she had done it before. Not awkwardly, not desperately, correctly. "Let him go," she said. That was the moment Mason stopped understanding his own life. The Commando stared at her. Blood ran from his nose onto the scarf. He almost sounded hurt when he spoke. "You brought them into this." Sirens wailed in the distance. The other attackers shouted. The window had closed. The tall man released Mason, back toward the SUV, and for 1 terrible second, Mason thought he'd fire into the truck and end everything. Instead, he looked at Nora one last time and said, "He'll find you now." Then they were gone. Tires screamed. The SUV disappeared into the highway dark. Nora dropped the rifle. Her whole body started shaking so badly, Mason thought she was going into shock. Ellie burst out of the truck and ran straight into Nora's arms. Mason stood there bleeding under the gas station lights, staring at his wife as if he'd never seen her before. Because wives who taught watercolor classes at the community center were not supposed to know how to clear a rifle safety with one thumb. And men in Commando gear were not supposed to look at them like history. Back in the truck, Ellie sat in the middle seat, wrapped in Mason's flannel, crying herself quiet. Nora pressed a wad of napkins to the cut above Mason's eye while he drove with white knuckles and 1,000 thoughts crashing into each other. He should have gone to the police station. He knew that. But every time he turned that way, Nora whispered, "No, please, not yet." Not yet. The two most dangerous words in a marriage. He drove home instead. Their house sat at the end of a sleepy street lined with identical porches, bicycles on lawns, porch lights left on for husbands working late. It was the kind of street Mason had chosen on purpose after years of being a single dad, because safe was all he had ever wanted. Safe locks, safe neighbors, safe routines. Not whatever had just followed them home from somebody else's nightmare. He carried Ellie inside when she finally drifted off against his shoulder. Her little fingers still clutched his shirt. When he came back downstairs, Nora was in the kitchen, scrubbing blood off her hands. Not trembling now, scrubbing. Mason leaned against the doorway, ribs screaming. Who were they? She kept washing. Nora? She shut off the tap but didn't turn around. I need the truth, he said, voice low. Right now. When she faced him, her eyes were swollen but dry. If I tell you, you'll take Ellie and leave. That depends on what you tell me. A broken laugh escaped her. No. It depends on whether you still know who I am. He stared at her. Then tell me who you are. For a second, he thought she would. Instead, she whispered, I'm the reason they came. Silence filled the kitchen so completely that even the refrigerator hum sounded cruel. Mason had known grief before. His first wife, Claire, died in a car wreck when Ellie was 3 months old. He learned how to heat bottles one-handed, how to fall asleep sitting up, how to work 2 jobs and still show up to preschool recitals with dried grease on his cuffs and crackers in his pockets. He had learned what lonely really was. Then Nora had walked into the auto shop one rainy Tuesday with paint on her jeans and a broken taillight, and somehow Ellie had liked her before Mason did. She taught Ellie to braid yarn into bookmarks. She stayed for pancakes. She stayed for winter. She stayed long enough that the house didn't echo anymore. And now Mason was looking at the woman who rebuilt their shattered little life and realizing there was an entire country of secrets behind her eyes. Were those soldiers? He asked. No. Then what? Men who work like soldiers when someone rich enough is paying. He felt the room tilt. Someone's paying to take you? She nodded once. Why? I ran. From what? Her mouth trembled. My family. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Ellie. Mason lowered his voice. What kind of family sends armed men after you? Nora opened a drawer, reached behind the cutlery tray, and pulled out a passport. Then another. Then another. 3 passports. 3 names. 3 faces that were all her. Mason looked at the stack, then at her. And something old and ugly moved in his chest. Not fear. Betrayal. You've got to be kidding me. I was trying to bury her, Nora whispered. Her? The woman I was before I met you. You let me marry a stranger? Tears finally spilled down her face. No, I married you because for the first time in my life I wanted to be a real person. Mason laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Real people usually start with their actual names. She flinched. That would have been enough for one night in any normal marriage. Their night wasn't finished. Because while Mason stood there, holding his entire trust like shattered glass, the motion sensor in the backyard clicked on. Both of them turned. A shadow moved past the kitchen window. Nora's expression changed instantly. Not panic this time. Calculation. She shoved the passports at Mason. "Get Ellie, bathroom, now." "What?" "Do it!" He hated that he obeyed. Maybe because there was something in her tone he had only heard in emergency rooms and funerals. The sound of somebody who already knew the next terrible thing before anyone else. He sprinted upstairs, scooped Ellie out of bed while she blinked in confusion, and locked them into the upstairs bathroom. Through the door, he heard drawers opening downstairs, heard Nora moving fast. Ellie clung to him. "Is it the bad guys?" Mason pressed her head into his chest. "I've got you." Then the back door exploded inward. Ellie jerked. Mason's heart slammed so hard he thought it would break bone. Voices below. Boots. A crash. Then two sharp pops. Not as loud as before. Suppressed. Mason's blood went cold. He shoved the bathroom window up, looked at the two-story drop to the side yard, and started calculating whether he could jump holding Ellie without breaking both their legs. Then came a sound he did not expect. Nora's voice. Cold. Commanding. "Tell him I'm not running again." A body hit the wall downstairs. Another crash. Then silence. Mason stayed frozen for a full 5 seconds before he opened the bathroom door and rushed down with Ellie in his arms. The kitchen looked like a storm had learned how to hate. A chair split in half, glass everywhere. One man unconscious near the counter. Another half outside the broken back door, bleeding from the shoulder. And Nora stood in the center of it, with a pistol pointed at the floor and her chest heaving. Ellie saw the gun and buried her face. Mason stared at his wife. "Who are you?" he asked again, except this time it sounded less like anger and more like prayer. Nora looked at the unconscious intruder, then at Ellie. "I'm the reason she's not safe anymore." That night, Mason didn't sleep. He sat in the hallway outside Ellie's room with an ice pack on his ribs and a baseball bat across his lap like some exhausted medieval guard. Nora sat on the floor at the far end, knees drawn to her chest, not speaking. At 3 a.m, Ellie padded out carrying her blanket. She looked at Mason first, then at Nora. "Are we gonna die?" No child should ask that in a voice that small. Mason reached for her, but Ellie moved past him and stood in front of Nora. "Were you pretending?" Ellie asked. Nora's face broke. "What? When you made me soup and came to school and helped me when I couldn't sleep. Was that fake?" "There are wounds bullets can't compete with." Nora sank to her knees. "No, baby. No. None of that was fake." "Then why are men with masks trying to take you?" Nora opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Ellie's eyes filled. "Everybody leaves." Mason felt that one hit somewhere ancient. Claire's funeral. Ellie's tiny hand gripping nothing. The first year of learning how many different forms abandonment could wear. Nora reached for Ellie, but stopped halfway like she hadn't earned the right. "I didn't want this life touching yours," she whispered. Ellie backed away. "But it did." Then she turned and went back to her room. Nora made no sound at first, just folded in on herself quietly, as if she'd had a lifetime of practice breaking where no one could hear it. By sunrise, the police had come and gone. Mason lied. Nora lied better. Security footage from the gas station had conveniently glitched at the exact wrong time. The intruders from the house had vanished before patrol cars arrived, helped away by someone waiting beyond the trees. Whoever wanted Nora had money, discipline, and patience. At 9 in the morning, while Ellie slept curled beside a stuffed rabbit, Mason walked into the garage and found Nora packing a duffel bag. "No." She didn't stop. "If I leave," she said, "they stop coming here." "You don't know that." "I know the people chasing me." He grabbed the bag. "Then tell me." She closed her eyes. "My name is not Nora Bennett." He said nothing. "It's Mila Kovac." The surname meant nothing to him. The fear in her face did. "My father built a security empire out of war," she said. "Private contracts, resource protection, extraction work. That's the clean version. The real version is simpler. He sold violence to whoever could afford it." Mason felt sick. "My brother and I grew up in compounds, not homes. There were guards, handlers, rules. Obedience was love. Silence was survival." "Your brother?" Mason asked. She nodded, staring at some old room only she could see. "Luca. He was older by 2 years. When we were kids, he'd leave bread outside my door when I was locked in. He used to tell me he'd take me to the sea one day because I'd never seen water that wasn't behind barbed wire." Her voice cracked on the last word. "What happened?" "My mother tried to get me out. Just me. She said Luca was already too watched. We ran during a transfer. There was a fire. Men died. I never saw my mother again." Nora swallowed hard. "My father told everyone I was dead. I made sure the lie stayed useful." Mason's jaw tightened. "And your brother?" "I thought he chose my father." "Thought?" She looked away. "The man at the gas station was Luca." The world seemed to go silent in a new, awful way. Mason blinked once. "The commando chasing you was your brother?" "Yes." He sat down slowly on the workbench because his legs had stopped being reliable. "Why didn't you say that?" "Because if I said it out loud, it would become real. And if it became real, then it meant he found me. Which means my father knows I'm alive." Mason looked toward the house, toward Ellie. "What do they want?" Nora hesitated too long. "What," Mason repeated, "do they want?" She pulled a small metal key from a chain around her neck. "For 16 years, I kept something my father wants back." The key opened a safe deposit box on the far side of town. Inside was a weathered notebook, a flash drive wrapped in plastic, and a photograph of 2 children standing in front of a military truck. The girl was thin, solemn, 11 maybe. The boy beside her had one hand on her shoulder like a promise. Nora touched the photo with 2 fingers. "That's Luca." He looked softer as a child, less frightening, sadder somehow. "What's on the drive?" "Everything my mother died to take. Names, payments, contracts, video, proof of disappearances, villages cleared for mining routes, journalists bought, politicians owned. My father's whole empire runs on respectable men pretending blood is an accounting problem." Mason stared at her. "Why not give this to the police?" "I tried once. The officer disappeared. After that, I stopped believing uniforms meant anything." Before Mason could answer, Nora's burner phone buzzed in her pocket. She went still. The screen showed an unknown number. Mason took the phone, answered. For a few seconds there was only static. Then a familiar voice said, "If she's with you, you've already waited too long." Mason gripped the phone. "Who is this?" "You know who." The gray-eyed commando, Luca. "Try speaking clearly without a rifle in your hand," Mason said. A short breath on the line, almost a laugh. "You hit harder than you look. Why are you hunting my wife?" Silence. Then, "Because if I get to her second, she dies." Mason glanced at Nora. Luca continued. "Our father sent other teams after she refused to come willingly. They are not under orders to retrieve. They are under orders to erase." Nora mouthed, "Don't believe him." Mason said, "Convenient. You think I care what you believe?" Luca's voice sharpened. "I warned her at the station. I came alone first. She ran again. Now he knows about the child." Mason's skin turned to ice. "You say Ellie's name again, and I'll find you." Another pause. When Luca spoke next, the menace was still there, but something raw had bled through it. "I'm trying to stop you from burying your daughter the way our mother was buried. Tell Mila that if she still remembers the sea, she knows where to meet me." The call ended. Mason lowered the phone slowly. Nora looked like she might be sick. "We have to move. Today." "Is he lying?" "He lies like breathing." "That wasn't my question." She stared at him, and this time the answer hurt because it was quiet. "I don't know." They took Ellie to Mason's old cabin outside town, a place his father used for fishing until his heart gave out and the roof started losing arguments with weather. It was isolated, ugly, and hidden by pines. Ellie didn't complain once. That scared Mason more than tears. She spent the drive drawing in her notebook. When he asked what she was making, she shut it closed. At the cabin, Mason nailed a blanket over the back window and checked the doors while Nora crouched beside Ellie, trying to get anything more than one-word answers. Nothing. Children know when adults are holding the sky together with lies. That evening, Mason went outside to split wood, mostly because he needed to hit something that wouldn't bleed. The sun was dying orange through the trees when Nora came out and stood a few feet away. "I should have told you years ago." He kept swinging. "Yes. I was afraid. So was I when I married you. That's kind of the point." He buried the axe head into the stump and turned to face her. "I let you into my daughter's life." "I know." "No," he snapped. "I don't think you do." She flinched. "You don't get to bring death to my door, and then talk to me like this is some tragic little secret romance. My kid looked me in the eyes last night and asked if she was going to die. Do you understand what that does to a man?" Nora's lips parted, but he wasn't done. "I spent years building something stable because she deserved at least one parent who stayed. Then you came in, and I let myself believe maybe we were done surviving. Maybe we could just live." His voice cracked on the last word. "Were you ever planning to trust me?" Nora looked down. "I planned to tell you after every holiday, after every quiet month, after every time Ellie laughed and I thought, maybe fate forgot me." "Fate didn't forget you." "No." She lifted wet eyes to his. "It followed me here." A branch snapped in the woods. Both of them turned. Mason moved first, grabbing the shotgun by the cabin door. Too late. A flashbang detonated through the front window. White light, sound tearing open. Ellie screamed. Mason stumbled half-blind as the cabin door burst inward. Two black-clad men swept in. Nora lunged for Ellie. Mason fired once and blew a hole through the wall inches from a man's shoulder. Then, someone hit Mason from behind so hard the floor came up and smashed him in the teeth. Boots, shouting, Ellie crying for her dad. He rolled, vision ringing, and saw a masked attacker dragging Nora by the hair toward the porch, while another pinned Ellie against the sofa. Something in Mason broke all the way open. He came off the floor like an animal, drove the shotgun stock into the nearest man's knee, heard it snap, then grabbed the fireplace poker and swung until hands left his family. Outside, another shot cracked, not at him, at the attacker hauling Nora. The man dropped instantly. At the tree line stood Luca, rifle up, face uncovered this time. Blood on his mouth from where Mason had broken it the night before. Gray eyes like storm water. He fired twice more, forcing the remaining attackers into cover. Then he ran toward the cabin. Mason raised the shotgun at him. "Move and I'll kill you." Luca stopped 3 yards away. "Fair," he said, breathing hard. "But do it after we leave." Nora stared at him like she was seeing both a brother and a stranger wearing his bones. Luca looked at Ellie last. His whole face changed for half a second. Maybe because she was hiding behind Nora, the way a small Nora once hid behind someone else. "We have 3 minutes," he said. "Maybe less." Mason wanted to hate how credible he sounded. Instead, he hated that he had no better option. They fled through the rear woods as engines roared up the dirt road. Mason carried Ellie. Luca moved ahead with ruthless efficiency. Nora kept glancing at her brother like one wrong blink would make him disappear again. After 20 minutes, they reached an abandoned ranger shed buried in brush. No one spoke until Ellie finally fell asleep from terror and exhaustion against Mason's chest. Then Mason rounded on Luca. "Talk." Luca leaned against the wall, stripped a magazine from his rifle, checked it, replaced it. "Father doesn't want the drive anymore." Nora froze. "What?" "He wants everyone who knows it exists dead." She shook her head. "No, he still needs—" He already copied most of what mattered years ago and buried the rest behind men in government. What you have now is leverage, and leverage becomes danger when it grows a conscience. Mason said, "Then why keep chasing her?" Luca's jaw tightened. "Because the only chance I had to get her out was to make her afraid enough to move." Nora stared at him in disbelief. "You tried to take me at gunpoint." "I knew you wouldn't come if I asked softly." "You put a rifle on my husband." "And I didn't shoot him." Mason took a step forward. "That's your defense?" Luca met his stare. "You were standing between me and the one person our father would skin alive to recover his reputation. I chose not to kill you. In my line of work, that's practically tenderness." Under any other circumstance, Mason might have hit him just for saying it. Instead, he said, "Why should I believe a word from you?" Luca reached into his vest slowly and pulled out something small wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Nora. A burned silver locket. The hinge barely worked. Inside was a tiny picture of a woman holding 2 children. Nora gasped like the air had turned to knives. "Moms," she whispered. "I took it from the fire," Luca said. "I was 13. Nora's hand started shaking. "You told me you'd come," she said, voice breaking. "That night. You said you'd come after us. Luca looked away. I did. Silence. Mason felt it shift around them, heavy and intimate and decades old. What happened? Nora asked. Luca gave the kind of smile that has no joy in it. Father happened. He told them then. He had followed the escape route after the alarm, found the car burning in the ravine, found men already there, their mother dead, Mila gone, father waiting. And when he realized you were missing, Luca said, looking at Nora, he needed someone to punish for that. I was available. Nora covered her mouth. He trained me himself after that, Luca continued. Every failure was your name. Every mission was a lesson. Every time I hesitated, he reminded me what happens when family chooses betrayal. The room went quiet except for Ellie's sleeping breaths. Mason had imagined monsters his whole life as men who enjoyed hurting people. He had not imagined the more believable kind, men who called it discipline. Nora whispered, "Why didn't you find me sooner?" Luca laughed once, hollow. I did. Twice. Her eyes widened. The first time you were working at a diner in Cleveland under the name Anna Pierce. You looked happy. I left without speaking to you. He swallowed. The second time, you were already pregnant. Mason looked up sharply. Nora blinked. Pregnant? Luca's expression faltered. You lost it. I was watching from across the street when the ambulance came. Nora made a sound so small it barely existed. Mason stared at her. She had told him about the miscarriage, early in their marriage. Said she never wanted to talk about it again because it felt like grieving someone she'd never gotten to meet. And all that time, her brother had been close enough to see the stretcher. Why now? Mason asked. Because father is dying. Nora looked stunned. What? Liver, fast. He wants legacy polished before he goes. No loose ends. No daughter living free with evidence. No son with doubts. Luca's eyes hardened. He has a gala in 2 nights. Cameras, donors, ministers. A final performance as savior of men he buried. Mason felt the shape of the thing forming before Luca said it. He'll be there. Luca nodded. And if we go public? Mason asked. Luca looked at the flash drive. Then we do it in the one place he cannot fully control. In front of people who helped make him untouchable. Nora whispered. He'll kill us before we reach the room. He'll try, Luca said. Mason looked down at Ellie asleep in his arms, dirt on her cheek, lashes still wet. He thought of the life he wanted for her. Boring mornings, packed lunches, algebra, first crushes, the luxury of ordinary. Then he thought of men with rifles finding her at 10 or 12 or 17, because adults had been too afraid to finish what started before she was born. He looked at Nora. For the first time since the attack, she didn't look like a liar to him. She looked like someone who had been running for so long she no longer knew how to stand still without apologizing. What's the plan? He asked. They hid Ellie with Mrs. Alvarez, Mason's widowed neighbor from 2 streets over, the only person he trusted without explanation. He simply said, if anyone asks, she hasn't been here. Mrs. Alvarez looked at the bruise on his face, pulled Ellie into a fierce hug and replied, then she hasn't. The hardest part was Ellie. She clung to Nora at the front steps. Are you leaving again? Nora knelt in front of her, already crying. "I'm leaving so I can come back." "That's what people say when they don't." Mason looked away, because children can tell the truth so cleanly it feels like being cut. Nora took Ellie's drawing notebook gently. "Can I see what you made?" After a long hesitation, Ellie handed it over. It was a picture of the four of them at the beach: Mason, Ellie, Nora, and a fourth figure standing far away in the water, almost erased by waves. "Who's that?" Nora asked softly. Ellie shrugged. "The person who's coming." Luca, standing by the truck, went very still. Nora kissed Ellie's forehead. "Listen to me. No matter what you hear about me, no matter what you find out, loving you was the truest thing I ever did." Ellie's mouth trembled. "Then come back true." Nora nearly collapsed after that, and maybe only Mason noticed. The gala took place in a glass-walled museum downtown, the kind of building that looks transparent while hiding everything important in reflections. Dragan Kovac's foundation logo rotated across giant screens. Children, medicine, rebuilding, peace. The clean lies rich men wear when they want applause. Luca got them inside through a service entrance with forged credentials and the kind of confidence only someone trained to enter locked worlds can fake. Mason hated how well he fit there. Inside, waiters floated through marble halls, carrying champagne for people whose watches cost more than Mason's truck. Senators laughed beside generals. News cameras rolled. At the center of it all, beneath a chandelier that looked like frozen rain, stood Dragan Kovac. Older than his photos, thinner, one hand shaking slightly around a glass. But his smile was steady. The smile of a man who believed history belonged to whoever survived long enough to edit it. Nora stopped breathing. Mason touched her wrist. She flinched, then held on. Dragan stepped to the stage as music lowered. "My friends," he began warmly, and the room answered with polite attention. "Tonight, we celebrate protection. We celebrate the brave work of securing fragile communities in dangerous parts of the world." Mason saw Nora's face harden into something almost unreadable. She whispered, "He used to say that before raids." Luca moved toward the control booth with the drive. Then everything collapsed. A hand seized Mason from behind. Another grabbed Nora. Across the room, Luca was tackled by two security men before he reached the booth. Dragan did not look surprised. He looked disappointed. He lifted the microphone and smiled at the crowd. "It seems grief has followed my family into public again." Spotlights snapped toward them. Nora struggled as cameras turned. Murmurs spread. Dragan stepped down from the stage, voice amplified and gentle. "My daughter has been unwell for many years. Trauma creates fantasies, paranoia, violence." He glanced at Luca. "And my son has always been loyal to blood, even when blood is broken." Public humiliation, perfectly choreographed. Nora's face drained as whispers swept the room. Mason realized with horror that Dragan wasn't just trapping them. He was erasing them in real time. Then Ellie's voice echoed in his head. "Come back, true." Mason stopped struggling. That made the guard holding him loosen just enough. Mason drove his heel backward into the man's shin, ripped free, grabbed a waiter's tray, and smashed it into the second guard's face. Glass burst across the floor. Guests screamed. Cameras kept rolling. "Luca!" Mason shouted. Luca, somehow already half out of his restraints, headbutted the man over him and threw a hard drive the size of a lighter across the room. Nora caught it. Dragon's calm finally cracked. "Take it!" Security rushed. Mason vaulted the edge of the stage and slammed into the first man reaching Nora. She ran for the podium. Another guard caught her arm. Luca shot him in the shoulder with a pistol no one had seen until then. The room detonated into chaos. Dragon grabbed Nora himself. Not like a father, like an owner reclaiming stolen property. "You destroy this family and call it courage?" he hissed. Nora stared at him through tears. "You destroyed it when you taught your children fear was love." He raised a concealed blade toward her ribs. Luca saw it first. So did Mason. They moved at the same time, but Luca was closer. He hit Dragon so hard, the blade turned mid-thrust. By the time Mason reached them, both men were on the floor. Dragon looked stunned, at the handle buried in his own abdomen. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Dragon looked up at Luca, not in pain, but in outrage. "You chose her." Luca's face was white. "No." He glanced at Nora, then at Mason, then at the cameras. "I chose to stop obeying you." Dragon slumped, blood spreading across the museum floor beneath all that charitable light. Security shouted. Guests screamed. Some ran. Some filmed. Nora climbed to the podium with shaking hands and jammed the drive into the presentation laptop. For one awful second, nothing happened. Then the foundation logo vanished. Video filled the screens. Villages burning. Contract files. Payments. Dragon's voice in recordings. Cold. Administrative. Discussing casualties like fuel costs. The room changed. You could feel power shifting by the inch. A senator backed away from the stage. A donor covered her mouth. One anchor on a local network kept speaking into her mic, with the bright, hungry disbelief of someone realizing they were accidentally inside history. Nora stood at the podium, tears on her face, shoulders squared. "My name is Mila Kovac," she said into the microphone. "And everything my father built was paid for in human lives. Mine almost included." No one looked away. Not anymore. By the time sirens filled the block, the story was too public to bury. Too witnessed. Too late. Outside, in the frenzy of emergency lights and shouting reporters, Mason found Luca sitting against an ambulance tire with blood on his sleeve. A bullet had gone through clean. Nora was with him, holding the burned locket in one hand and her brother's wrist in the other, like she was afraid either might vanish. Mason stayed back at first. This was not his history. Then, Luca looked up at him and said, "You should have let me take her at the gas station." Mason gave a tired laugh. "You're insane if you think that works as an apology." A faint smile touched Luca's mouth. "I'm not practiced at those." Nora started crying again, the exhausted kind now, the kind that comes after your body realizes it survived. She leaned her forehead against Luca's shoulder. "I thought you hated me." "I tried to," he said. "It was easier than missing you." That was the line that broke whatever was left between them. Nora held him tighter. Luca closed his eyes. Not soldiers now, not fugitives, just two children who lost their mother in fire and found each other on the far side of ruin. 3 weeks later, the house on Mason Street still had a new back door, and neighbors who pretended not to stare. The news cycle was relentless. Arrests, leaks, resignations. Old victims finding names for what had happened to them. Nora testified. Luca did too, under guard. Mason fixed engines during the day and slept with less violence in his chest at night. Not peace exactly. Peace was too neat a word for people still learning how to trust the quiet. One evening, Ellie sat at the kitchen table coloring while Nora made soup. The normal sound of a spoon hitting a pot almost made Mason emotional. Ellie looked up at Luca, who was visiting before being transferred to a secure military facility as part of his deal. "Are you the person from the water?" she asked. Luca blinked. "From your drawing?" She nodded. He looked unexpectedly nervous. "Maybe." Ellie considered him for a long second, then pushed a blue crayon across the table. "If you're in our family picture, you should have a color." Luca stared at the crayon like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nora turned away and wiped her eyes. Mason watched Ellie return to her drawing, watched Nora stir the soup with one hand pressed to her mouth, and understood something he'd been too angry to see before. Family wasn't always the people who gave you blood. Sometimes it was the people who chose to stop passing pain forward. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Nora stood on the porch with Mason while cicadas sang in the dark. "I won't ask you to forget what I hid," she said. "Good." A tiny laugh escaped her. "I was hoping for slightly more romance." He looked at her, really looked this time. The fear, the shame, the strength it took to stay after everything had blown open. "I don't forgive the lie," he said. Her face fell, just a little. Then he stepped closer. "But I forgive the woman who told it, because she thought survival and love couldn't exist in the same life." Nora's eyes filled. Mason brushed a tear from her cheek. "No more ghosts in this house." "No more," she whispered. "And if another commando shows up," she almost smiled, "you're still going to hit him with a tire iron?" He let out a breathy laugh. "Worked once." She kissed him then. Not like a movie. Not perfect. A little shaky. A little relieved. The kind of kiss people give after choosing each other with full knowledge of the wreckage. Inside, Ellie's drawing lay open on the table. 4 figures at the beach. No one standing far away anymore. Just one family at the shoreline, messy and uneven, and finally facing the water together. Some people spend their whole lives running from the fire that made them. The brave ones turn around, walk back through the smoke, and make sure it burns out with them. Tell me, if the person you loved hid a past this dangerous, would you stay and fight for them? Or would betrayal be the end? Read in one continuous single narrator performance with James only. Keep pacing slightly fast and tight, like approximately 1.3 times compared with standard audiobook pacing. Keep pauses minimal. Maintain cinematic storytelling energy from start to finish without changing narrator identity.